Hey everybody, Kaylee Fretz here. I had a problem over the weekend. I was working on my bike and I snapped a little arm off of a very, very old repair stand that I've had for a while. And so I had to go buy a new one. Now, lucky for me, I am an Escape Collective member. And so I headed over to the Escape Collective member purchase program page, escapecollective.com/member-purchase-program. And I saw that Feedback Sports offers 25% off to all Escape Collective members. Great. So I went to the Feedback Sports website, shopped around a little bit. The Pro Mechanic bike repair stand looks pretty good to me. I went and grabbed the code from the member purchase program site, dropped it in at checkout, and lo and behold, the Pro Mechanic bike repair stand from Feedback Sports, instead of being $395, is now $296.25. So I've just saved myself almost $100, which, for those of you out there doing the math, is an entire year of Escape Collective membership. I think you're probably picking up what I'm laying down here, which is that the Escape Collective member purchase program pays for itself pretty darn quickly. If you're buying a kit, if you're buying wheels, if you're buying a new repair stand, make sure you are a member and make sure you're using your member purchase program codes, or else you're just wasting money. Head over to escapecollective.com/join, sign up today, get your member purchase program codes, and start shopping.
Hello, welcome back to Geek Warning, the cycling tech focused podcast from Escape Collective. I'm Dave Rome, and joining me this week,
Ronan Mc Laughlin.
And if you need to repeat a few things, Ronan, this week, I've been testing electric inflators, and I think I'm hard of hearing now. So, exactly, I find that a little traumatic, if I'm being honest. It's a little triggering.
I thought you might.
Yeah, I've been wearing pretty hefty ear protection. I don't know, just hours on end of that buzzing. I still feel like it's had a negative impact on me. So the things I do for this job.
It's kind of how I feel on a Tuesday afternoon, having recorded a podcast with you. It was Tuesday morning.
Oh, no.
Oh, that's too much.
This is just so summary. All right. Well, this week we've got something on our mind, specifically on Ronan's mind. We've got a PSA, which relates to my last threaded article. There's a bit of interesting news related to the mountain bike side, but I'm going to try explain pedal kickback to Ronan from the mountain bike world, and a number of devices that are trying to fix for it or solve for it, and why you may consider them, and perhaps why not, depending on what you consider mountain biking to be. And we'll wrap up with an Ask a Wrench. Brad Copeland is still driving a big red van around the US at the moment, and Zach Edwards is on a plane back from Europe at the moment. So it'll just be me with Ask a Wrench, and hopefully Ronan. I hope Ronan can help out with that one. But
we'll see how you behave.
Let's get into it. I think the thing on our mind for this week is actually on your mind, which is I think seeing tests and talking about bike reviews and all sorts of review products and how people want definitive answers has you feeling a little frustrated by it. What's going on?
Yeah, I came in from a bike ride on, what was it, Monday morning, and immediately just started typing out this thing that I sent over to you. I was like, here's what we can have on my mind this week. And it sort of relates to, it sort of relates to just the challenges that I've been facing of late in writing reviews. And I think the challenge stems from, if I can pinpoint it, is like this. I've heard it described as one of the problems with the internet is that it just wants like a binary yes or no answer. And so, as we're reviewing stuff, typically bikes, but it could be anything. We get the answer, we get the questions like, oh, is it fast? Is it aero? Is it slow? Is it light? Is it heavy? Is it, stiff? Is it flexy?
Is it the fastest?
Yeah. It kind of, this sort of peaked on Saturday for me when I was out on the group ride and I had another rider in that group ask me, is that a good bike of the bike that I was on? But he was on the exact same bike himself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like my answer was good for what? I didn't actually say that, but that was what I was thinking in my head. Like, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about good for racing? Are we talking about good for this club ride? Are we talking about good for, good for what? And then, it's the same with practically everything. As I sat down and wrote this thing up, was like tire size, tire clearance, tire pressure, waterproofness. If I think about all the stuff I'm testing at the moment, like even it extends into like how many grams of carbs per hour should we have, and everybody just wants this like fixed number. And every time I sit down to write something now, I'm like, on the one mind, I'm conscious like none of this actually. There's so much more we can give in a review than just a binary good or bad answer.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I can't get myself to doing that because I'm conscious that, the audience wants an answer from me here. And then you just end up in this sort of spiral looking for ways to find an answer to.
I think anyone listening is starting to realize why we don't see very many Ronan reviews. He writes a lot, and just very few see the light of day.
Anyway, the conclusion I came to was like it's the reverse of the Pareto principle, and that the Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule,
Right.
where roughly 80% of the effects or results come from 20% of the causes or inputs, and it feels like in cycling where 80% of the attention is on 20% of what's important.
Which is, you're talking weight, stiffness,
I
aero
mean,
in a
again,
road
if we well, aero's the best example. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like literally, I was talking to Ingmar Jungnickel. Apologies if I've butchered his name, but he used to be specialized, and he's set up this aero.app. It's like a CFD thing that you can do at home, or do with a bike fitter. Actually, is the model they're going with. And he has this Pareto gains principle, where instead of marginal gains, you focus on the things that make the biggest difference. And this is, again,
like
perfect. Yes. Although
Sorry.
I don't think that's what we were thinking of. Anyway, if I finally get to make my point, it's like, if you think about an aero bike, we're all obsessed on what's the most aero bike, when actually the biggest source of drag is the rider by far and away. Like, it's somewhere around 80% of the drag of the total system comes from the rider, and we're paying so little attention to the rider on top of the bike, and all the attention on whether this new aero bike is more aero than this other new aero bike or the previous version of the aero bike. And really, we're talking about 1% gains of the 20% of the problem. It's like tiny, and we're so focused on that. And I'm like, I could give you so much more insight into how a bike rides. And it was James who, when I started this job, James said to me, like, we often think about reviews as like someone might be considering buying this bike, and we have to tell them if it's what it's like before they go and buy it, or if they should buy it. And he said while that is the case, more often than not, you're actually just providing an insight into how the bike rides for the people who will never buy this bike, either because they've chosen to buy something else, or it's just not within their price range, or for whatever reason they won't have this bike and they want to know what it's like. And we get the opportunity to ride it, and so we get the opportunity to convey that. And at the moment I'm tripping over all these various obstacles that are irrelevant, and thus not actually providing the insight that people want, because I have this like stress that, actually I need to provide an answer on whether this bike is more aero than this other one. And like, ultimately
it's an impossible question answer.
It is actually impossible to answer. It also doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I think it's probably worth noting, like, when we started Escape, for a while there, we were talking about basically making you our full-time aero tester, and we were going to set up a leaderboard of the fastest road bike, and we're just going to get all brands to send you their aero race bikes, and you were going to do real world condition testing on these bikes with aerometers and all sorts of ways to control the environment and really figure out what bike is best in a real world environment. And I think months in, you realize not only how difficult it is, but while you can get a number to print, how useless that number actually is. Can you sort of explain a bit about that?
Yeah, give me 1 second here because I've made notes on this to keep me on track. I just need to find where I've made them. Yeah, we called that the aero leaderboard. It was like one of the first articles we published on Escape Collective was promising to do this thing. Well, actually, we didn't promise to do it. We promised to try, and ultimately decided that it wasn't worth our while, because although the more I explored the option, the more I tried to deliver it, the more we realized that yes, I could get you a result, and but the accuracy of that result, or the usefulness of that result, probably more accurately, was practically non-existent. And that's kind of where I'm like also struggling, is like, it seems like I have three options when it comes to review. Either I do a review without trying to assess whether something is more aero or faster or stuffer or whatever it is. Weight is pretty easy to objectively measure, but the rest of them are not. Or I don't do the review, which is kind of happening at the moment. Or the third option is I do a review with an answer, and that seems to be what a lot of the internet wants. Maybe not our listeners, but certainly a lot of the internet just wants an answer, and the accuracy of that answer is less important. It doesn't actually matter if it's accurate or not, just that the answer is in there is all that matters.
And like, I mean, not to throw other outlets under the bus here, but like Cycling News, for example, has been putting a lot of time in the wind tunnel lately. But when you dig into the nuance of that, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, they're giving you an answer. Maybe it's accurate. Maybe, for their test conditions, maybe it's good. But the actual usefulness and result of like, is that bike that just won their test the fastest bike on the road? You can't answer that. It's not a relevant conclusion, because I mean, there's just so many variables in their test alone, with like, different group sets, different wheels, different tires, all being used comparably. But you put the rider on top, and as you said, at least 80% of the equation there is the rider, and how that rider interacts with the bike is going to have a vastly bigger impact than what that bike actually tested as in the wind tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, can I just say my mind is absolutely blown by the effort that the guys at Cycle News have gone to in doing those tests, because that just, it is pretty phenomenal what they've done, to be fair to them.
It's a big lift,
Yeah, huge.
As it is with Tour Magazine, that's done it for years,
Yeah, and I would love for us to have a way to do something similar. But ultimately where I keep landing is whether it's Tour Magazine, whether it's Cycling News, or whether it is, there's a YouTube channel, Faster Fiction or something I think it's called, and there's various other sources of information like this also. Ultimately where I keep landing is, that is interesting, but I'm not going to make decisions for my performance based on their results. And in some cases that's because the results are, they're done with flawed testing, or in other cases it's because the results are collected quite well, but actually just relevant to that rider or those conditions. And that's, you might look at it and go, well, if the rider is 80% of the drag, well, there's still the 20% part there that comes from the bike, and so if we're measuring that, it's useful information. And I'd say in some ways maybe it is, and it helps to keep manufacturers honest if they think that there is some element of independent testing happening. But at the same time, there's so, you said the word there, interactions. There's so many interactions between rider and bike that at this point in time, every rider will affect every bike differently, and the same way as every set of wheels will affect every bike differently, and more often now we see wheels develop for a bike.
Or change the tire, change the computer, change the bottle cages. You're also having
change the rear to raider hanger standard, and you won't get So that and then even just change things like the width of the rider's thighs, or the way they sit on the bike, or and ultimately if you ask me why the aero leaderboard didn't happen, ultimately it didn't happen for a few reasons. Not number one, but one of the first challenges I had was just like, first of all, getting bikes in, but then getting bikes in that were matched equally. So I could get bikes in, but then I would have to change stem length, handlebar width, and the question arises, well, which do you test the bike in its stock configuration, because that's the way people buy it, or do you give it the best chance and have all the bikes set up equally? In which case you're testing for me, not for the consumer. And then on top of that, like, I mean, if less so now with the new SRAM group set, but the older SRAM group set, the levers, and same with Campbag, the levers were considerably taller than Shimano's. And so if you've got different group sets, you're not testing the bike, you're testing the group set at that point.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there was...
Likewise for the handlebar width, right? Like you're not testing the bike if there's a handlebar width difference.
And stem
width.
length.
Yeah.
And stem length as well. You can compensate and try to maintain the same rider position, but ultimately something has to change to maintain the same rider position if the setup isn't exactly the same. Even saddles. I mean, if you have slightly more pressure on one than the other, and now, fast forward to today, the problem started rising around crank length and chainring sizes and 1-by and 2-by, and all these things are controllable, but just the amount of time they require to control them, again, I'll come back to an answer I think that is only relevant to me. If we put you, Dave, if we did the exact same control for you, Dave, we could end up with a different result.
It'd be a much higher number.
Oh, you're much more aero than me, man.
You need not.
But I sort of put all that down into like fit and spec control. But even beyond that, you've just got like, different ambient weather conditions and stuff that are going to cause changes as well. And even, so my idea was to do it outdoors, and then you get into, well, you're going to have to transfer parameters between bikes, because if you're using different parameters on different bikes, then you may as well not bother doing the tests as well, because there's going to be differences even within the same model of parameter. And that gets you back to then the group set control, because if you're trying to use a SRAM Quark parameter across all the bikes, then they need to be SRAM bikes, or at least have dub bottom brackets.
And then you get into the really crazy end of things where you start talking about like the effect of temperature on rolling resistance.
Yeah, 100%. And
even if you control the wheel set and the tires and the tire pressure, it's still, there's a measurable difference there.
Yeah, and not just on rolling resistance, but on so we were going to have a control bike, and if I did a test in July with the control bike and it's 20 degrees and say 70% humidity or something like that, then just maybe higher pressure or something like that, and fast forward to October, my initial idea was that in having a control bike, and I had secretly thought, well, we might actually have two control bikes, because then you'd have two comparison points to check that each day lines up, but actually just if you take the test bike from July and test the other test bike in October and swap them, you might have got a different result compared to the control baseline bike, just because of the flow interactions and all that are affected by the change in temperature and humidity and pressure that you get in July versus October. So it was like you kind of, to get an actual accurate result, even for me personally, you need to do all the testing on a single day, which, I mean, there is only 24 hours in a day. And the whole idea was to have a running leaderboard that you could be updating all the time. And then, again, we all know aero is speed dependent. So you would have to do it across 4 speeds, and, you're also at the mercy of the weather when it comes to what yaw angle you're testing at, because in a wind tunnel you can control that, but in our outdoor testing you couldn't have. So there, it's, and none of that is to say that this would be useless information. It would be very, very useful for me personally. It just wouldn't have been of any use to you, Dave, and so I couldn't justify my working time to my own personal testing.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you're talking about endless hours put in to get some results you can stand by. But as you said, those results are not, end of the day, useful. They're just results. I think, like fundamentally, this kind of overlaps very closely with how I consider products that I call into review, and how much this weighs on me about actually trying to call in products for review that I think I can provide an answer on, or provide a higher level answer on than what is already out there on the internet. And I think, there's just a lot of categories out there that I no longer want to review, or that I seek to review, just because I don't feel like I can add anything truly useful. I can offer an opinion, but I don't think it's truly useful in the end. And it's kind of what informs some of my decisions around the products I do tests. I feel like I can kind of come to a conclusion on them that is pretty hardy.
Maybe you're the wrong person. Maybe I'm going to ask you this question, but maybe I'm asking this question to the listening audience. Is like, do you think you reviewing the things that you can give an answer on is the right direction or the easy direction? Should you be reviewing more, and should you be reviewing stuff that you're less certain of an answer on, but you can still give you're an experienced reviewer, you can still try a thing and form an opinion on it and convey that opinion. I guess, and I'm not sure if the question is, should you be doing more reviews, or if you should just be broadening your range of reviews, but either way,
I'm good.
But is it you're good and what you're doing is right, or is it you're good and what you're doing is actually just the easy road?
Sure.
Both.
I think it's probably a bit of both. But no, I mean, it's, I think I like to do things that I can be confident in the result of. And for me, like, these over the last 3, 4, maybe 5 years, I've tested fewer and fewer pure road race bikes, because I just don't feel like I can, it's kind of, coming full circle. I don't feel like I can give a definitive answer on whether it achieves the thing that is most important to the person buying it, which is this bike faster? I can't answer that anymore. What I can tell you is how well it is to service and, look after, and what ownership is like, and how it is to adjust things and dial in the fit and the build quality and the ride quality and the weight. But I can't actually tell you whether this is a better race bike than that other race bike.
But as much as I am the aero nerd, I also think everything you mentioned there, with the exception of maybe weight, are more important than whether you're looking at, a Cervelo or a Factor, and if one is 0.001 CDA less than the other, because ultimately how easy something is to adjust the fit around will dictate how aero you can get on the bike, which is a far bigger thing, as we've already talked about. But then also how easy it is to live with, and how durable it is, and how easy it is to service, and all those things will dictate how often or not the bike lets you down in a race. and so ultimately, there's nothing slower than the bike that stopped at the side of the road.
Yep, correct. So, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of meat to this topic. I think there's a lot of interesting facets of it. But fundamentally, I think the why you didn't end up doing your aero leaderboard is pretty fascinating. And I think it's not from a want of trying. I think it's just, it's one of those things that the more you know, the more you realize, the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it?
Yeah, but what I sort of realized this week again that there's a part of the Dunning-Kruger effect that I always forget. And so, like, when I mention Dunning-Kruger effect, I always say, like, it's your overestimation of, it's basically a cognitive bias where people with low ability in certain domain tend to overestimate their competence. And I usually describe it as, like, the less you know about something, the more you think you know. But actually, there's the second part of the explanation is that those with high ability often underestimate theirs. And I'm not saying I have high ability, but I think you get to a point where you start to appreciate how much you don't know. And then you sort of start second guessing everything. Yeah. And so you're, on the one hand, you're like, I need an answer to this. And the other hand, you're like, I don't know if I know the answer. And then you can never get to this happy medium where it's just like, just write the thing. Just as James said, tell people what it's like to write. Tell people what it's like to live with, and I think that it goes against every fiber of my being to say that should be enough, but it should be enough. If for me personally, I'm still going to go out and aero test, but I don't think my aero testing should be what makes a review worthwhile or not. I don't think that should be what I shouldn't hang my hat on determining whether or not one aero bike is faster than another.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's hanging your hat on those single metrics has led to some pretty bad bikes over the years, right? Like Tour Magazine. We've said this before on the podcast, but Tour Magazine, for all the good that they've done, they've also, led manufacturers down a path of building bikes to a test rather than building bikes to a rider or building bikes to the world. So, like the old stiffness to weight ratio test before they started doing aero testing, stiffness to weight ratio test just encouraged a few European brands just to go out and try win that bench test, and it made for unforgiving, awful, delicate, awful bikes to ride that also happen to be very fragile if crashed, but they're all light and they're stiff, and that won the test.
Or the smart brands just made a one-off frame to send for testing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think while it's on, sorry, I was trying to wrap this up, but that's a perfect example of you got these Tour Magazine tests where the bikes are submitted in their stock formation. Cycling News is now doing very similar. I believe they're testing bikes as they come.
They do a few things. They use control wheels and they test them as they come. They test them with a rider, without a rider, and yeah.
Okay. All right. So there you go. They're doing more than I realized they're doing. So, but yeah, I think at least for the Tour Magazine, you wonder why some brands are still speccing 26mm tires, at least on the front wheel. That's pretty much it. It's to test fastest and to say that they are faster than the previous version, or lighter than the previous version. But once you put that bike on the road and you tweak it and make the adjustments necessary to make that bike as best as it can be for yourself, those aero results are no longer relevant.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was like a therapy session for me or what, for some sort of review of my work or lack of work or whatever, but I found it useful, so thanks, Dave.
Oh, I'm very glad. Very glad. All right, well, let's get you up from the couch and we'll move you over to the PSA now. Yeah, so PSA this week comes directly off the back of my threaded from last week, which is now live. And that threaded was all about a note just to clean your damn brake pistons. I think it's one of the most commonly messed up common tasks I see, where people replace their own disc brake pads and they just push in the old dirty brake pads and then slap the new pads in and adjust things up. And what you're doing when you do that is you're pushing all the brake dust and all the grit from the environment back into your piston bores, and that's basically encouraging things like, at best, sticky pistons down the line, but worse, you're basically forcing dirt into your brake system. You're likely causing premature wear on the piston seals, and yeah, you tend to cause like those sticky pistons will tend to cause like a more spongy brake lever feel, poorer brake performance, rubbing brakes. So yeah, it's something that I think is quite avoidable with an extra step or two of cleaning your brake pistons, and that's the PSA. They need to be cleaned.
I'm just wondering how long it took you to get that shot of the spray for the feature image on that threaded.
Here's the struggle. Like, a lot of people ask me to do video, and here's the secret is that I work alone. And so I'm actually holding, in that shot, I am holding a DSLR camera one-handed while spraying it and hoping the angle works out, with flashes as well, because there's insufficient light. So I can't remember how many goes it took me to get that shot. I think I got quite lucky early on, maybe 4 or 5 shots. But that's why I don't do videos, because it's really painful when you're by yourself. So yeah, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, distracting us from the actual PSA there. And yeah, like, it can be so tempting if you've got a slight bit of brake rub or whatever, and you feel like, I just need to quickly push the pads back in. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think especially on like off-road bikes where it's maybe wet and dirty, the chances of that leading to even harder to fix brake rub in future is greater. And so taking the extra couple of minutes to remove the pads, clean the pistons, and then push them on is what you're suggesting here.
Yeah, exactly. I think on off-road bikes, like the mud and stuff is a factor. I think realistically, brake dust is probably the bigger issue because it's finer. But in off-road bikes, especially modern off-road bikes, you've got a lot of 4-piston calipers where the pistons are much more sensitive to movement and less, they are more likely to not pull in evenly. And so in that sense, the off-road bikes are more sensitive to this and need more care to get those brakes running real nice. Whereas like a road brake is just 2 pistons, and those pistons are pretty big and tend to be relatively resilient to being treated poorly. But yeah, I think it's either way, like, yeah, dust and environmental grit and stuff will have this impact. And yes, the answer is to take the pads out, give the pistons a quick scrub. In my article, I have some specific recommendations around, using alcohol and a very specific bottle brush that I found really good. But yeah, I think, even just like a clean microfiber cloth floss through there is going to do a whole lot more than nothing at all. But yeah, the main thing is clean it before you start pushing pistons back in. And then, once it's clean, then push those pads in as much as you want while it's clean. But I think that's the PSA. Clean your brake pistons. Yeah. So if you want like a step-by-step instructions on that, or any information about like what tools to use for, servicing those brake pistons, including like tools for walking them out to clean them more thoroughly and get them moving better, then yeah, head to Escape Collective. Check out my threaded series. I think it's number 47 of the series. So quite a few by now.
I was going to say, was there some 3D printing involved?
Yes, a little bit. Very optional 3D printing, but member Chris Hirschap makes some of my favorite piston exposure tools related to like caliper piston cleaning and stuff, and they've been kind of a game changer for how I do it and for how many people now do it. And yeah, so it's a product he sells, but I think you can also get some similar versions you can download. I know like Hope Brakes, for example, actually offer the print files for their piston exposure tools on their website for free if you got a 3D printer. So yeah, depending on how nerdy you want to get on this, it is 3D printing can be good. All right, let's move over to the tech news corner. There's just one item on there, which is DT Swiss has entered the anti-kickback device game. So this is for mountain bikes, specifically full suspension mountain bikes. And they've got a new thing called the DF, standing for Degrees of Freedom. And it's a kit that goes into their relatively new high engagement DEG hubs, or DEG hubs. They've also got a version for like their equivalent e-bike hub. So yeah, anyway, it's quite interesting, but basically it decouples the engagement points. So you've still got 90-tooth ratchets, but those ratchets can be set to sort of free float either by 0 degrees, so they're fixed like a normal ratchet would be, or they can float by 10 or 20 degrees in either direction, forward and backwards. And I guess this is where I needed to explain why you'd want to do that.
Yeah, asking for a friend, Dave. What is kickback? I do know what kickback is. I don't know if I've ever experienced it, but yeah, just explain.
Anti-kickback devices, devices designed to remove kickback, and kickback is basically something that presents itself
when you stand behind a horse.
It's not related to a horse, although if you've got a horse to pivot, it kind of is. Niche joke. So yeah, it's basically in a full suspension mountain bike, as the rear end of the bike, or as the rear wheel moves through and pivots around the axle, there is some length change in most bikes. So basically what happens is like the the chainstay length will actually change as the suspension is compressed. And what that does is it pulls on the chain. And so you get this sensation that if your feet were not connected to the pedals, when the suspension moves through its cycle, you'd actually see the chain pull backwards on the pedals, and you'd see your cranks kick back, which is where the name comes from. However, when you've got your feet on the pedals, often your body weight is enough to resist that. And so what ends up happening is you create tension in the chain, and the chain actually like stiffens up the suspension. So your feet is actively working against the efficiency of the suspension design. And so, basically it's all happening through the chain. And so the idea of some of these anti-kickback designs is that they try to like isolate the chain. This DEG hub is trying to isolate the chain at the free hub, trying to effectively let the cassette just pivot freely without any resistance. And you can also get similar versions that happen at the crank arm. The whole idea is like to let things float a little bit. So when that chain tugs, that there's a little bit of give, and that it's not either going through your feet or through having a direct impact on the suspension action. And so, general outcome is you get a smoother ride with like less pulling back on your feet, and the suspension is more active. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Just like, how big a problem is it though?
Yeah, so if you imagine the more suspension travel your bike has, the more range of movement it has, the more length of chain growth it could have, the bigger the impact is happening, or the more kickback it's getting. So if you're on a little cross country bike, they do have kickback, but it's pretty minimal because the amount of actual like growth or movement of that rear end is only it's only I don't want to give any exact numbers on this because it varies so much. It's limited by the amount of travel available. As you go up in the amount of suspension travel and you get into these enduro downhill bikes, that rear wheel can actually move significantly, which can really have a significant impact on how much that chain is under tension. And this is kind of what in downhill and enduro bikes, there's been a lot of attention given to these what they call high pivot suspension bikes, and the whole idea of that is to basically isolate the chain from the suspension action. The downside is this, increased weight, increased complexity, and increased drivetrain drag. So that's why you haven't seen these come over to cross country as an option. But yeah, it's certainly a thing in mountain bikes, and I'd say typically the rougher terrain that you ride and the bigger the bike that you ride, the more benefit you'd get from an anti-kickback device.
And so of this new DT take, what's your take?
Yeah, so I think it's probably worth giving a little bit of background on this. So DT Swiss has entered the game. One of the leaders in the market is called O-Chain. They interestingly just got acquired by SRAM. So I think this is a category that we're going to see a lot of attention given to. DT Swiss's design is kind of in a similar vein to a product that E13 has been doing. They've got a rear hub called the Sidekick, which again tries to sort of let the whole pole mechanism float. DT Swiss's idea or approach to it, I think, is probably the most elegant, or one of the most elegant I've seen to date, in that it fits existing hubs. It adds very marginal weight. You can choose to isolate it or just switch it off, and you can do that by simply pulling the cassette off and doing so. They don't claim it adds anything to the maintenance or ongoing ownership of the bike. And yeah, it's like €130 for a kit to upgrade if you've already got their DEG hub, which truthfully there's not that many of those hubs out. But yeah, hypothetically, if you had that hub, it's not a big expense. So I'm pretty impressed by this, but I think, fundamentally it comes back to that. I kind of wanted to include this section because I think we typically don't cover a lot of gravity focused mountain bikes, and I think this is going to remain a product category for that. I think when we're talking road and gravel, it's irrelevant because there's no full suspension involved. And then when we're talking cross country, I still think the suspension travel and the application of the bike is still more limited, where the benefits of these are sort of outweighed by the negatives, which are increased noise or just like this more vagueness when you're pedaling. When you go from coasting to going to drive, there's always going to be like this free motion before these things engage, allow you to drive the chain forward. And I think that's too big of a trade-off.
When you shared the DT press release there, and I was like, yeah, maybe solving one issue, but introducing another and having that.
Yep. So I think there's a few things going on there, but like I think for cross country, like you probably are going to want to have a power meter in the crank in a lot of scenarios, and having something like an O chain is probably going to take the place of a power meter. I mean, you could probably have the power meter in the axle or the pedal, but there are options. But I think fundamentally it's like increased complexity for reduced benefit when you're talking cross country discipline. So, but yeah, I think that all said, if you're riding super rough terrain, then there might be some people on like a 120 mil, 130 mil travel bike that could start to see benefit from these systems, and it's certainly something we'll be looking into in the future. I'm certainly, I'm personally keen to try like this DT Swiss system just because it is so non-intrusive to the rest of the bike that I kind of want to see, just how obvious these downsides are and whether there is upside for a short travel bike. Also, a bit of news from SRAM. They quietly released a firmware update that may or may not improve the speed of your shifting if you're on SRAM transmission. So SRAM transmission from day one has been a little bit of a slow one to shift across multiple gears. Very fast if you just demand one shift, but if you want to ask for multiple shifts, it kind of stacks them up and does them leisurely to ensure the chains never really like crossed over more than one cog at a time. Sorry, more than two cogs at a time. But yeah, they've released a new update. So version 2.53.1. I said that very weirdly. But yeah, that's the latest firmware update. And yeah, a lot of people are reporting that it's a few seconds faster. But some people are doing the update and reporting that it's no different at all. And that's because seemingly SRAM hasn't released it to all group sets yet. So that's a peculiar one. I'm left wondering whether they had tried to do like a soft rollout of this to test it in the market without telling anyone, and then Bike Mag caught onto it, and then we caught onto it, and then told everyone about it, and SRAM's hope of a soft launch is ruined.
Yeah, and there was something to do with that 1987 group also, wasn't there? Where it was like
that's their latest release. So they have that 1987 like silver special edition, very expensive alloy group set. And because it's so new, it had already been flashed with the latest firmware, which meant it was faster. But yeah, I think, now they're seemingly slowly rolling out those same improvements to every other transmission access group set. So, but yeah, I would say if you are hoping for like grip shift levels of speed or Shimano mechanical levels of speed where you can just dump 5 gears at a time, this still isn't it. And I'm going to say if you're asking for that, then you're asking for occasionally broken chains too. So it's,
even in a non-e-bike?
Yeah, I think that's probably the qualifier. I think people that have come from riding bikes their whole life and have gone through the generations of if you demand too much under power, you break a chain, have learned the technique of correct shifting. And so they come to transmission, they're like, I don't want my drivetrain to tell me how to shift. I just want to like be able to shift as much as I want. And I've got the technique and I know to back off the power. But then like SRAM's really designed it to be like foolproof, where it's like, first and foremost, it was designed for e-bikers that might be putting out 800 watts and demanding a shift. And so it doesn't let you screw things up. It'll make the shift on 800 watts, but it'll do it one gear at a time. And so, yeah, I think it's just a very different perspective that I think people that know how to shift are probably want to be able to get more speed out of the system. But I think overall, I think for me at least, I know how to shift, but SRAM transmissions taught me kind of how to not to shift in that I no longer think about backing off power. I just like click the button, even if I'm like 700-800 watts deep on a steep incline, I'll still do it knowing that it's going to make that shift perfectly. And I think for me, that's kind of been the biggest change out of it is that, I've learnt to not lose momentum or not pause in my pedaling action to get the derailleur to do its thing. I just keep powering and click the button.
It's kind of the opposite of what is SRAM called? Sequential shifting. Shimano synchro shift, where like it'll shift when you're not expecting it. you go to do an attack and suddenly you're going from the small ring to the big ring, or vice versa.
Yeah.
It's like, I wasn't expecting that. And that's why I don't really use those systems. But this is kind of the opposite, where it's like, you're trying to do a shift when you're also like, I will back off. I will do this gently. I will let this happen. But there's like a safeguard built into it.
I was going to say, like, I'm rewinding the clock 2.5-3 years now from when I first reviewed Transmission. But like, SRAM really encouraged me to do like the heaviest shift I can do under power. They're like, try break the chain under shifting. Like, they really encouraged me to. And at first I was, it just, every bone in my body didn't want to do this. Like, it's just, I've spent 20 years knowing how to shift and knowing when not to shift. But yeah, I do like, I think I did a 1200 watt sprint while shifting. It was perfectly fine. Yeah, it was a bit loud, but it went into gear, and I was like expecting to end up like on the ground with a broken chain and a face full of blood, but it hasn't failed. And so I've kind of come around to the idea that yes, it's slow, but it's good in a slow way.
I know, but like, yeah, it can do that. But how often are you actually needing or looking to do that?
Oh, I can't even do 1200 watts at the moment. So,
but you've got a
not very
derivative
often.
just slow all the time. So it's like all the shifts are just feel lethargic, so that the once in a lifetime that you want to do a 1200 watt shift, you can do it.
It happens. I'd say it happens semi regularly on a mountain bike, and even more so on an e-bike. E-bike, it's multiple times a ride. But on a mountain bike,
I appreciate e-bikes, yes.
Yeah, on a mountain bike, on an XC bike, once you know you can do it, you end up doing it fairly regularly. Like, it's quite common for me to be doing like 600-700 watts up a steep incline seated, and ask for an easier gear or something, and not now not take the power off. Whereas previously I would have just like stubbornly tried to stick to that gear until I could ease off the power a bit. So there are still scenarios, but I think it's a mountain bike specific issue, which is
you reminded me somehow of Jeremy Clarkson there, reviewing a very early flappy paddle gearbox or whatever in a car. He was like, I tell you when you shift.
Exactly. Yes.
It wouldn't downshift for him.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, there you have it. Fast shifting to SRAM, maybe. Ronan, I think it's time you and I head over to the member-only section for Ask a Wrench. And yeah, it's probably worth noting at this point, I think anyone listening to this should know that it is only members that get Ask a Wrench. But for some reason, they're on the fence, then head to escapecollective.com/join. And in return, you will get access to every podcast, every article, every feel-good feeling, every discount that the member purchase program has to offer, and all of that. Plus, I'll throw in the supporting independent journalism. All right, let's head on over. And yeah, I guess for those that are wondering what's coming up, we've got question answering. There's one about bottom brackets and how to update an older specialized bottom bracket and things to consider in that. We've got another question about chain replacement and cassette replacement and chainring replacement, sort of how to check for each of those and what to consider. There's a question about older generation red ETAP axis style hydro shifters, and whether they're serviceable, and sort of how to fix and diagnose some sluggish feeling brakes in that scenario. And we've also got a fourth one. We're jamming them in because we've got quite a long queue to get through. I'm trying to catch up, so I'm jamming in an extra one lately. And yeah, that one returns to bottom brackets, but a different frame, different question. And yeah, just sort of pondering whether a certain type of press fit bottom bracket would be enough to keep us or our suggestion away from buying a new bike that has that. So we'll discuss that one as well. Aaron, let's head on over there.
Hey everybody, Kaylee Fretz here. I just want to talk to you about another great reason to become an Escape Collective member, and that is our member purchase program. Now, this is really simple. What this means is if you are an Escape Collective member, you get discounts at all sorts of high-end brands that we've partnered up with. So, let me walk you through this real quick. Let's say I need a new helmet. POC is one of the brands that is part of the member purchase program. So I'm going to head over to the member purchase program page. I'm going to scroll down to POC. I'm going to click Create Code. And then I'm going to head over to the POC website. I'm going to browse around a little bit, and I think what I want is a ventral air with MIPS. That's $270 US. All I'm going to do is hit Add to Cart, open up my cart, and then enter the code that I got from the Escape member purchase program. Copy, paste. I hit Apply, and there we go. The discount is applied. This helmet has just gone from $270 down $54 to $216. Of course, $54 is roughly half of an Escape membership just in that one purchase. So if you're buying helmets or you're buying clothing or you're buying wheels, you need to become a member of Escape Collective. It would be irresponsible not to. Let me just run you through some of the other brands that you're getting discounts from. 7 Mesh, Attacker, awesome clothing. Cane Creek, get yourself a new bottom bracket. Chapter 2, Feedback Sports, Hammerhead, Hunt Wheels, Map, Mavic or Not, Pactimo, Pedla, POC, Ritchie, Silka, Velocio, all sorts of good stuff. In fact, I just ran the same thing on a Silka pump, which is like $500, and the discount just from that one purchase would cover an entire year of Escape Collective membership. So head over to escapecollective.com/join. Once you do that, you'll get access to the member purchase program page. You can grab your code and you can start shopping. Thanks very much.